It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing the graphic novel On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden.
Correct.
Would you like to do the plot?
I will try. In a sort of not particularly realistic outer space, Mia is in the past, Mia is a girls' boarding school student who desperately wants to be part of the future sports thing, and also has a developing romance with the mysterious new girl Grace. In the future, about 5 years later, Mia is working as a old space buildings restorer and salvage person, and eventually would like to talk to Grace at least one more time. And eventually we find out what happened to Grace both in the past and also in the present.
Yeah.
And there's flying fish.
Yes, the spaceships are fish. Large. The
spaceships are fish. The space stations are just buildings floating in space. It's actually pretty cool, like aesthetically.
Are there wizards in this one?
I mean, kind of, actually. The thing is that the wizard only... I mean, first of all, that fox thing who shows up near the end is definitely a wizard. And I would argue that really the Hill family in general are wizards. Or at least have, access. They're controlling information and power.
I would say that this is a book where you can find wizards if you look for them, but the wizards are mostly defined by their absence.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Like, there are systems of power going on in this world, but they are grinding along far, far in the background most of the time. And even the immediate representatives of it who we see are sort of covered in this layer of obfuscation. And part of the deal with that is that this is a classic. There are no men in this story. Not a single one.
Not a single one.
Not a single solitary man in this story. Which is of interest in and of itself.
Yes.
But may lead to the answer to the next question on the list. Are there lesbians in this story?
They're absolutely lesbians. And this is one of those stories where, like, everyone, with the exception of one non-binary person, everyone in this universe is a woman. And yet, some people are just, like, extra lesbian. And I would count Mia as one of those, as well as Alma and Char.
Yes. There's a sort of gradient of lesbian from probably to very definitely that covers every character that we see.
There's some of these characters would be lesbians in any universe.
Yes, absolutely. These are some of the most lesbian character designs that you will ever see in comics.
I mean, Mia gets the dramatic lesbian haircut moment.
Yes, she does.
But
yes, she does. Everybody loves the power haircut. All those locks are locking you down. Get de-stressed and arrest your tresses. Aerodynamic and bald. And to the extent that the conflict occurs, it is mostly intra-lesbian conflict in this book.
It is mostly intra-lesbian conflict. Though again, there is definitely a sort of the power of queer love against something strange and against something. The something is just very nebulously defined. But I still maintain that there's some wizardy stuff going on. And it is interfering in our lesbians' love lives.
Yes. Well, we should... I'm very eager to talk about this one because, like,
yes,
in my reading of it, and I'll head on to why you should read it here.
Yes.
But one of the reasons that you should read it is that this is like a beautiful piece of work done by a master, like a young master, but one of those, like, obviously incredibly gifted artists that one runs across occasionally. And as such, part of like my reaction to this, even on a reread many years later, is just to boggle at it.
It's so pretty.
It is so incredibly pretty. Uh,
And it's pretty, not like in that sort of empty, polished way, but just like it, like you said, it's, this was pretty much her debut, and just like the use of color, the use of shadows, everything is just, occasionally you hit a panel and you're just like, wow.
I think that she'd published her graphic memoir about being an ice skater before this, or
I'm pretty sure the ice skating memoir came out after On a Sunbeam debuted as a webcomic.
Okay.
It may have come out, Spinning, I think, may have come out before On the Sunbeam was published as a collection.
Sure. That certainly was true, but maybe not before On a Sunbeam was launched. On a Sunbeam was launched before Spinning was released, but Tilly Walden had already published 3 other graphic novels at that point. So there is that part of it. And then there is also the part of it where, like, my lumping and splitting brain, my little categorization beaver that scurries around when I read stuff trying to put it into little holes, it was going absolutely nuts with this one, because it exists on so many different nexuses of, like, developments of trends and developments of genres and innovations and cross-cultural stuff that, like, I feel like on this reread I almost forgot to think about the story because I was too busy thinking about the various like categories that you could hang on the story and what that means. So there will be a lot of discussion of that after the spoiler zone, although if there's too much of that discussion, Alexis, I would ask you to rein me in.
I'll do my best.
But it is both. It is one of those interesting things, and maybe this is also a negative, although it's not a why you shouldn't read it. But, like, this felt incredibly new and fresh and interesting when it came out, and it feels so of its time now. Only, like, just about 10 years later, which is fascinating.
Yeah, though, for me, I think we should talk about that more post spoiler zone, because for me there are parts that still feel new and creative, and there are parts that feel incredibly of its time. So,
but regardless, it's still available for free on the internet without ads to look at. So there's really, if you like comics, I mean, it may make you sad, but only in a very sort of cozy way.
Sort of a pleasant melancholy.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, I will also say that the strength of this is mostly in the moments. There's a lot of nice little moments, particularly visually, but also little character beats. And that's a good reason to read this. Is that if you like just sort of a lot of little quiet, interactions between two characters.
Yes. As to why you shouldn't read it, it is not the most tightly plotted thing in the world.
No, I mean, as with many webcomics,
I mean, that's not really the point, I would imagine, and you sort of would get the sense pretty quickly that that's not really the point. But there is the sort of issue where the conflicts and the sort of the plot dealies that you might be most interested in get resolved at a certain point, and then the story keeps going, and there's, like, the back half of it is this sort of fever dream sequence,
right?
That is maybe less compelling than the more grounded parts. And
yeah, the ending is kind of, which, I mean, the back half would have probably worked better if the ending weren't so abrupt. The little sort of coda at the end didn't quite work for me. I feel like it sort of falls into this unfortunate thing where the storytelling is good enough to kind of paper over some of the problems with that come with serialization when the serialized product hasn't been like tightly plotted from the beginning. But in some ways that makes it worse because then you start expecting everything to resolve neatly and the resolution doesn't quite work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it remains absolutely gorgeous throughout.
Oh, in fact, it gets prettier as it goes on.
Yes.
The fever dream sequences are great visually.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is that it might be, even though there's a escalating amount of like conflict and peril, it's very hard to believe that anything bad could happen in this world, which means that the stakes are a little bit feel a little bit underwhelming as you go on to where they're bearing more of the load of the plot.
I think that some of that is partly that we're going in, like, I don't think that was the case when I first read it.
Mm. Yeah,
I'm of like 8 years ago. So I, like memory, but I remember the staircase sequences, waiting for each new update and not being 100% sure that everybody was going to make it.
Mm.
And I think that in some ways this suffers from the cozy explosion that has come after it, because now rereading it, the stakes seem much lower, and that was partly because I knew how it ended, but also that like the genre stakes have, genre expectation setting has changed. So
yes, and I have some thoughts about that, as you might expect, as we go on.
Which I suppose, which like does not affect the reading experience of somebody coming to it new now. You're going to come to it, understand, with today's genre expectations. So, it still goes to say why you shouldn't read, but it doesn't entirely feel like something that we can criticize the comic for too much. Although I suppose in some ways it's part of, it was part of creating this environment where that is true.
Mm. Content warnings. Yes. So there is no sexism in this world, obviously, and no homophobia in this world. But you do have a little bit of gender discrimination against non-binary people. That happens.
Possibly the only, but that we're definitely going to have to talk about the non-binary thing.
We are certainly going to have to talk about the yeah. But there is some injury, sort of
There's
peril,
some
poisoning,
animal death.
Yeah, not a whole lot else, I think.
Some like low key, some like schoolgirl bullying, though nothing too severe.
Spoiler zone. So yeah, I had this dawning thought as I was revisiting this, because my memories of this are all extremely positive. It was like one of my favorite webcomics, and I think a lot of people's favorite webcomics back at that time. And it
definitely sticks out in my mind as one of the best webcomics of that era.
And it feels like it's sort of fallen out of memory in a few ways, partially because it is really incongruous in a lot of ways for webcomics and the history of webcomics, while feeling like an inflection point in the history of webcomics, etc., etc. But my thought one revisiting this is, oh my god, is this a cozy? Because it is extremely cozy. But the answer that I eventually came to is, no, this is not a cozy. This is an iyashikei. And an iyashikei is a genre of anime and manga which has been around and I think codified since like the 70s. Where it is the plot is sort of slightly backgrounded, and the major thing that is of importance is the calming, detailed background, the world that it takes place in. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good world, because like examples of Iyashike include things like Yokohama Kaidashi Kiko or Girl's Last Tour, where the world is in fact a post-apocalypse. But it's like you don't have to worry about it. The stakes are low. And it's mostly about just sort of exploring this reality of a world that has like been sort of blown apart while being very sort of, everyday and humdrum in its beats. And that's certainly how
I still think you're overselling the cozy vibes of this. I mean, the thing is that unlike a lot of cozies, first of all, when she and Grace are separated, it's like an actually pretty emotionally wrenching moment in a way that cozies generally don't have. Even if you know that probably eventually they're going to reunite, it's still fairly emotionally wrenching. And also, for that matter, Elliot's entire deal, like, Elliot tries to go back and is almost killed, and their ending is they never really get resolution. They're never, they're never really going to go back with their, and make peace with the homeland that they've been exiled from.
Well, this is what I mean when I say it's not a cozy. That it isn't a cozy.
I know, but the thing is that most of the Iyashike also don't have these, like, I don't think have the ones that I've read. I don't feel like have these, fairly intense action scenes and, people like getting seriously injured, and for like the emotional stakes of them tend not to be quite so wrenching, I think.
This is true, although I happen to be in the middle of a rewatch of Haibane Renmei at the moment, which...
is Haibane Renmei like a classic Iyashike? Because if so, then I'll concede the point. I was thinking more of, the post-apocalyptic coffee shop one, which I love, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's... I think that, again, we're immediately running into the problem where I'm trying to put this in a hole where it doesn't belong.
Right.
But
the thing is that I think that part of this is that this has influence. I feel like this at least reads like it has Iyashike influences. And certainly it itself, I think, influenced the cozy, the cozies that came later, if not directly, then sort of in creating a space and a readership for them. But I think that this one's a little too weird to fit into either of these categories.
Yes. As I would say that Haibane Renmei is not a classic Iyashike, even though it has things in common with that. And is that actually, I think, much closer in its general tone and pacing to this. But
yeah.
To circle back, the reason that my immediate thought was, is this a cozy, is that, like, the environments that the girls live in is so cozy. Like, there's no better word for it. Like, this is a universe where you're always in a cozy dorm room, no matter what you're like. When you're at school, you're in a cozy dorm room. When you're at work, you're at a cozy, you sleep in a cozy dorm room. You sort of wear pajamas to work. Like, your two major modes of being are school uniform and pajamas. You're always, like, kind of rumpled and sleepy.
Except for the school dance where you get to dress up nice.
Right. It's like the immediate thing is, you get to live in a world where it's like all of the logistics are taken care of, and it's big breakfasts and then honest work. And like all of the like the overarching.
So what I'm hearing isn't so much that this is cozy as that this is offering. I mean, I guess, okay, I can see how this is offering a specific kind of millennial/elder Gen Z wish fulfillment.
Also, wish fulfillment for those who might want to live on Planet Girl, for whatever reason that might be. There's a handshake meme here between lesbians and a certain kind of anime fan. Yeah.
And in that way, it does overlap with cozy.
And you're surrounded by hot butch girls all the time under
Yeah.
in every circumstance. Like there's no situation in which you could possibly not be surrounded by hot butch girls.
Yes, that said, I mean, this again has things, um, this makes it, I mean, part of what's going on here is that both Mia and Grace are incredibly privileged people. Grace is the equivalent of royalty from some small, isolated country um, that has, fantastic natural resources, but and a largely autarkic economy. And Mia's just like a rich girl,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a rich girl she's a rich girl who's just bright and creative enough that despite the fact that she kind of spent a lot of the high school with terrible grades in a bit of a depression fugue, she still had one teacher decided that that she liked her enough that she pulled some strings to get her this this interesting, cool, definitely millennial wish fulfillment job where she gets the cozy dorm room and the pajamas to work and doing honest labor and etc.
Yes, both uh, both doing honest labor and wearing pajamas to work, because
Yes.
PPE doesn't exist in this universe except when the mean boss comes in and makes people wear PPE.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it feels. I mean, and this is one of the reasons why it felt so good when I first read it. The thing about looking at this now is that I'm like, oh, there must be a hidden cost, right? There must be a hidden darkness here again because everybody is so privileged.
There is. I mean, and it's there. You see it.
It sort of like it's still, you're still so sort of isolated from it in a certain way. It's like the staircase is this, is this resource rich place where and there's conflict over the resources, but it's also a resource rich place that was colonized within like the last few generations, and there were no natives to colonize. There's like,
Yeah, but yes, I mean, but the thing is that just because there isn't every single hidden darkness doesn't mean that there's no hidden darkness. There's nobody gets in, or the thing about the staircase is that it's almost impossible for people to get in and out. And so first we're told nobody gets in and out, and then later we find out that with Grace being the only exception, only because she's royalty. And then later you find out that also Elliot got out, so probably other people are also getting out. That there's smugglers and piracy because Alma and Shar are former smugglers and pirates, and that even though they're not really emotionally suited for the straight life, they are nonetheless, forcing themselves to live it because actually being smugglers and pirates isn't a good idea. And also, I mean, for that matter, you see Elliot's mentor is killed by a wild animal. Elliot kills the wild animal, and Elliot is, sentenced to death and permanently exiled. And the animal is just sort of still lying there, rotting forever.
mm-hmm.
Like it's actually, the thing is that I feel like this feels less like it's doing the thing I hate about cozies, where the world is full of bad things, but none of them ever happen to the people we care about because we're not supposed to care about anybody else. This feels more like it is a story that is set in a much broader world, and yes, we are telling the story of fairly privileged people with relatively low emotional stakes. But I mean, one of the things that I remembered after 8 years, picking up this comic again, was that Grace comes from a tiny kingdom where everything is controlled by her family. And the vibes, I did not feel like the comic was trying to convince me that that was cool, actually.
No, I would say not. It is one of those stories where absolutely everybody is largely trying to do their best under the circumstances that they're in, and that
Yes,
that doesn't mean that there is no conflict, and particularly there doesn't mean that there's no like emotional conflict between people. It's just that that almost everybody is given this like a, moments of humanity and a place from which you can understand their motivations and behavior, and everything. Everybody is largely like a real human being, even Grace's sisters and mother, except the boss who doesn't
except
respect
for the boss,
Elliot's
who doesn't
pronouns.
respect Elliot's pronouns. And that is actually, I think, the place where this feels the most of the cozy genre, where like in this world where people are where there's economic warfare and murder, the only person, and also schoolgirl bullying, the only person who does something irredeemable is getting somebody's pronouns wrong, which, as somebody who uses they them pronouns, I find this actually really kind of insulting and infuriating.
That is the most 2016 part of this story by like such a massive margin that it.
Yeah, the thing is that we're still getting novels with this.
Yeah.
On A Sunbeam was just ahead of the curve in terms of publications dealing with this. Particularly when Elliot is the only person possibly in the entire... Like, also, the idea that Elliot is introduced as non-binary, we see zero other non-binary people. How can you even be non-binary? They're non-unitary. Like, by being... There's no men in this world. So by being they, them, Elliot is introducing a binary. So, like, the use of the word non-binary just, like, really popped out for me. It's really jarring.
From a science fiction perspective, like, the use of the word non-binary is the first suggestion you get that men exist in this universe. Because for there to be a binary, there must...
And the only suggestion you get.
No. It's a girls' school that they go to. It's called a girls' school, which means that there must... To call it a girls' school must mean that there is something that is not a girls' school out there in the world. But that's the extent of it. But still,
the thing is, everybody only has moms.
It's true.
Everybody only has sisters. The only indication that there's, again, Elliot is basically the only indication that there is a gender binary at all. And as far as I can tell, it's Elliot. Everybody else is the gender binary, which is, again, why I do not think that non-binary was the appropriate term for them to use to describe Elliot.
And it is funny that the non-binary character is the one who committed the unforgivable sin and who is being hounded to death. And the sin is like hunting, is committing violence out of anger. So it is the masculine stain on this this person.
The only non-female person. It almost feels like something happened to all the men a few generations ago.
Yes, they weren't able to keep the old laws and were thus hunted to extinction because of their propensity to take trophies of the local fauna or something.
See, I was just assuming like a plague or something.
The usual plague, yeah.
The usual plague.
Maybe that's the dark thing in the background of this that nobody is talking about. Is the execution of all of the wizards is in fact the wizard.
Because because like we have girls' school, so that does imply that there are non-girls other than Elliot, but we don't see any of them.
Oh boy, okay. This is turning out to be the episode about categories and lumping and splitting, and then picking apart the categories rather than explaining why they're interesting. So let me take a stab at that here. Why we care about the existence of men in this universe. If this was lesbian sci-fi from 30 years ago, the inciting incident in the plot would be the arrival of men from planet men come to ruin everything. This doesn't happen here because we have moved on from the idea of a lesbian separatist utopia threatened by invading masculinity. But the comic is still pretty utopian, which is why I'm hung up on whether this is cozy or not. Cozy in this context being a term we tend to use in a derogatory sense for contemporary sci-fi that serves up simple and often questionable moral lessons without any real stakes, where bad people are punished and everything's okay in the eternal coffee shop AU of the spotless mind. So to recap the last 20 minutes of this podcast, is there wish fulfillment and escapism in this story? Yes. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No. Is the story not living up to some imaginary standard I've set for realistic depictions of social ills in its universe? Who cares? Can a story be a nice treat for people who like looking at cute butch women in sleepwear and still have worthwhile things to say? Of course. Am I asking these questions because I'm suspicious of things that I might like too much or for the wrong reasons? Is that why I'm having so much trouble stringing a sentence together in this episode? Is it shame? Maybe? Can we move on, please? Yeah, no, it's. I guess one of the things, like, you can read certain elements of this as, like, cozy or yashike, or you can also read this as dream logic, because the environments are incredibly dreamlike. Like, all of the book takes place in buildings, take place in huge buildings, huge labyrinth,
huge echoey buildings where it never seems to quite, like the way that the transition, you never get a sense of the layout of the space.
Yeah, and the sort of the way that traversing physical space is elastic. It can take forever. It can take no time at all. A lot of the sort of the two major pieces of plot conflict are trying to get to a place and not being able to get there fast enough. Both when Mia is trying to get to Grace before Grace leaves, and when they're trying to get the various sick people back to the ship to be healed. And so there's a lot of this that feels like it is taking place in a classic, archetypal dream. And I
mean, also, like, the fact that the ships are all giant goldfish.
Well, yeah, but, like, that's beautiful science fiction wonder. I get those last two things in my dreams all the time. I don't necessarily get the giant goldfish ships. But
that's fair.
But that may be a failing on my part. That might be a classic thing for a lot of people.
It feels like something. The goldfish ships feel like something out of Paprika or something. Like, feels like something out of a cartoon dream world.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that this works is that the dialogue is extremely naturalistic, and the conflicts and friendships between the characters feel very low key and well drawn. And so the whole story isn't floating off into nothingness the way that the environments are floating off into nothingness.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we can bring these two things together, where it's like part of the way that this is all happening within this place where Mia and the rest are privileged enough that they don't have to confront a lot of the worst things, is that their interpersonal relationships are very real, and the further out you get from them, both like spatially and in terms of one's conception of this universe, the more vague and unconsidered everything becomes. And it's like looking out at everything here, sort of regardless of what you know about the history of it, or like questions like what happened to the men, and why are there so many ruins everywhere? Was there a war? We learn a little bit about the sort of the economic collapse after the first,
maybe that's maybe that's related to where all the men went. They just weren't economically viable.
Right. But beyond a certain point, we're not looking, beyond a certain point, it's just beauty. It's just this sort of muzzy beauty, which is part of the privilege of the current moment. And this to me feels very like taken from manga.
Yes.
Not like taken from manga.
It's so manga. I mean, like the whole scene with Jules and the foxes feels so Nausicaa.
Yes. But just like in terms of the way that this is created, like there was a big quote unquote Western manga trend in webcomics in the 2000s, where it's like people sort of drew out of the like how to draw anime textbook, and did like high school romance stories and stuff. This feels to me like a true Western manga in that Walden is using manga tools, manga narrative tricks, manga layouts, and the ways of dealing with like very simple characters against very lush backgrounds and, sort of very sort of sketchy approach, which feels direct to pen. Whether it is or not, I don't know. And these flat colors. And notably for an avant-garde webcomic of this part, in the way that I thought that this was infinite canvas in my memory, and it is not. These are all like uniform pages of the same size that have been, broken down into these panels.
No, you're right. I also misremembered it. I'm glad that you read the webcomic version. I read the library book version, the physical book version. I'm glad that you went back and read the webcomic, because I also remembered it as being infinite canvas, and I remember going, I wonder what it's going to be like adapted to a physical book. And it's just because the backgrounds were so expansive and the world felt so infinite.
Yeah, the way the panels bleed off the edge of the pages and all of this stuff. Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. It is. Again, this is like a work of somebody who is really, really, really good at comics. And we can talk about this in the context of the history of webcomics also, where it's like when I was talking about those old, like, quote unquote Western manga comics, webcomics was the domain of enthusiastic amateurs for a long time. And then around the time that On a Sunbeam was publishing, it became the domain of professionals.
I feel like it was a little bit earlier than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it already had perhaps become the domain of professionals by that point.
And I feel like now it's becoming the domain of amateurs again.
Yes, when it has been broadly established that there is no money to be had in the webcomics field, it has now become...
Well, pretty much the only money to be had is a sufficiently successful webcomic can launch your career in, comics or animation.
The economic model for success in the first era of webcomics was to macro scale. Start your own gaming convention. Be inexplicably set for life. The last gasp of the Jim Davis model of cartooning. Or you could sell shovels in a gold rush by pivoting to printing t-shirts. The economic model for success in the second era of webcomics was to get hired as a storyboard artist by Pendleton Ward. Or to accidentally found your own cult. The economic model for success in the current era of webcomics is hope that Patreon doesn't change its terms of service again and work a couple other jobs. Yes. And as we've discussed, this one is not a career launcher if the career was already in step. And also this one was never... There was no attempt to monetize this ever. There were never ads with On a Sunbeam. And it is still available, as we said, for free, and which makes it a sort of gestural anomaly in a lot of places, but perhaps it is in that way indicative of the, like, this is a piece of art that is separate from the realities of the world, and also I don't have to worry about making money from this, and at least not initially, Maybe I have an eye to publishing it later, but these things overlap each other in the ways that one can read this. But this feels like sort of the last of its kind in that way. Like I cannot think of a, and please readers correct me if I'm wrong. I can't think of a comic that was published this way and was broadly influential and read and went from web to print since this one. I don't... And partially that's just because social media became the way that a lot of comics are distributed now, which
is a real problem, because social media is much worse at, like, preserving a comic in one place.
Yes, I remember trying to follow what Tilly Walden was doing after this and was like, oh, you're on Instagram, the single worst platform for a comic artist to try to produce things in, because you were constrained so hard by the aspect ratio of everything that you post. But there is sort of inevitably something elegiac about it in retrospect. Yeah, I'm going to get into like saying broad and unsupportable things about Japan again if I get too far into talking about the manga influence.
Especially because again, like there's heavy manga influence, but this isn't just like a manga influenced webcomic.
So let's talk about the plot.
Okay, so I'm going to complain about the ending briefly, just to stop you from saying unsupportable things about Japan.
Fair enough.
I so I actually I think more than you enjoyed the somewhat fever dream staircase part. My main problem with it, honestly, is that I thought it could be longer. Very a rare thing for me to say. I thought it could be. It was just doing too much, and it ended up with a lot of things that I thought were sort of pretty and added some in the moment tension, but didn't feel. Jules's dream quest with the foxes was cool, but didn't end up feeling like it added anything to the narrative, other than to give her something to do, and also cute spirit foxes, which awesome. And honestly, and like Elliot's thing, I like that Elliot's thing the resolution to Elliot's character arc is actually sometimes you can go home again, but only long enough to be stabbed a bunch of times and then run away. So I liked that, but I guess I just also could have felt like a little bit more could have been done with that. Again, these are the sort of things that I feel like would have worked better if it had been that they could have worked better if there'd been more foreshadowing for them ahead of time. And this is a problem with doing a serialized comic, where unless you're drawing the entire comic ahead of time and then publishing it serially, you don't get a chance to like go back and edit and add back in foreshadowing.
Yeah, I think that the sort of the issue is that it was meant to be, the first half of this is firmly Mia's story.
Yeah.
And we have, supporting characters to Mia's story. And then the back, not even half of the comic, as you say, it's not even, it's not particularly long. It feels almost like an addendum, despite the fact that it's where all the climaxes take place. We're attempting to do a character arc for every one of the supporting characters in a very short space of time. And there is simply just not enough room for that to happen in a story that has been paced the way it's been paced up until this point, because though
it's not just a matter of room for it to happen. I mean, the thing is that in some ways, like the bully girl gets more character growth in a few panels than Jules gets over her entire Fox quest.
That is true.
Which again, I liked the Fox quest. I just felt like the Fox quest didn't end up adding anything.
Besides getting a chance to draw, cool spirit foxes.
Which again, loved the cool spirit foxes. But I just and like the thing is that in some ways I think it's supposed to connect to what's going on with Elliot, but it doesn't quite. I mean, the thing is, you can tell, the dead spirit fox who Jules meets, and then before Marshmallow runs off, rescues her. I'm pretty sure is the one that Elliot killed, and so it's aesthetically and visually this really cool thing. But I feel like there's supposed to be some sort of broader thematic resonance here, and it doesn't quite click.
I think that part of that is because this is where the story starts to like sup on darkness a little bit as people are growing up. This is the point of the story where we learn a little bit more about space colonialism as it takes place, or as it took place in this. We learn about it in, I think, a rather half-baked fashion. In an attempt to explain the history of the world to somebody who, graduated high school without learning the history of the world somehow. Not that that's unlikely,
I mean,
but
like we see how hard Mia studied.
Yeah, but the problem is that like trying to draw on those like background thematic elements to give these gestures more weight betrays the way that we're trying to discuss things that have up till this point been so dreamlike and backgrounded, and we're still attempting to do it via dream logic. The Fox quest feels incredibly like a dream all the way through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're attempting to tell this mostly through emotional resonance and sort of the vibes that we're getting from the visuals. But you can't make but the problem is that in order to make this like a character arc, a moment of like, resolution or transformation for these characters, you then have to tie that back into the sort of mundane language interactions that these characters have had up until this point that have made them feel real. And I think that's where the disconnect happens.
Partly it's that it is disconnected from anything going on in Jules' story arc, which is, mostly about her relationship with her aunt. And I mean, also, though, you were saying the staircase doesn't have any indigenous people, but like the spirit foxes are, in fact, intelligent and capable of language, assuming that Jules isn't just like completely hallucinating. And so you do actually like there is an indigenous people, and they are, and for all that the staircase claims that they're protecting them, you'll note that the person that they've killed a human who was a map maker, who's, thus somebody whose entire job is to go out into their spaces, and then they kill her, and then her apprentice kills one of them. And yes, her apprentice gets exiled, but the fox is still dead, and the map maker has a statue in the public square.
Yeah.
So
I fully hallucinated that Tilly Walden was Canadian after rereading this. This felt
because
so
of the ice skating.
In part because of the ice skating, but in part because this whole sequence felt so Canada to me.
And now Isaac has switched from making unsupportable cultural
I feel much more comfortable
to Canada.
I feel much more comfortable slandering Canada. If we are in fact meant to take this as a metaphor about indigenous people, maybe making them magic spirit animals stuck in a living death isn't the best way to go about that. But regardless, but yes, there is a lot of weird, uncomfortable stuff with settler colonialism in the staircase, which is alluded to, and it would be, and I think that like I would be more inclined to read it as trying to make a genuine like statement via these removes of metaphor, if it were not contrasted with the statement that we made about respecting pronouns earlier in terms of the way that this story handles like messaging.
Right. There's a thing where, I'm pretty sure that it's deliberate that it's mentioned that, Grace isn't just that, Grace's family aren't just the elites. They're not even, dictator for life or whatever. They officially own everything on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
They're the owners, and I think that is meaningful. On the other hand, the only really unsubtle hit over your head political message that we get is, in fact, how dare you forget that someone uses they them pronouns and also are being ableist on top of that.
Maybe there's like maybe there's a point being made there. Like in this social milieu, in this very comfortable social milieu, we come down like a ton of bricks on the one thing and largely don't think about the other thing, despite the huge difference in scale and like socio-political consequence of the.
Yeah, the thing is that it also just feels very 2016.
Yeah. It is definitely. It feels like an accurate portrayal of the world in which it was written. So there you go. Again, this is most science fiction. Are we holding this story to higher standards just because it's so pretty?
But also, then the very end, I am not convinced that these four should be piloting a fish on their own. I think that the aunt and her wife should absolutely not have abandoned them to have their, early retirement, long delayed honeymoon, whatever. Um, I understand that the thing where the wing almost falls off is supposed to be proving that Mia is in fact capable of leadership in the moment, but also they almost let the wing of their fish fall off.
There the one of the major themes of this story that keeps coming back, and which I did not feel particularly invested in or persuaded by, is uh, why, when, under what circumstances you should follow the rules, under what circumstances you shouldn't follow the rules, and under what circumstances you should own up to having broken the rules, and under what circumstances your punishment is just or unjust for having broken the rules.
Honestly, my takeaway from this comic is never admit guilt. Yes. Unless you are untouchable. And you know what? My father, the defense attorney, raised me on that principle, so...
Yeah, but basically, like, it is we're going back to colonialism. I think that there is absolutely a rugged individualist, anti-nanny state. Like, the invisible wizards in this one are the people who are making them follow regulations and wear PPE on the job.
Yeah.
In fact, the correct thing to do is to let the 19-year-old go and pilot her own, be the captain of her own spaceship. And
yes, if the wing despite the fact that like Mia did almost, the narrative does not convince me at all that Mia did Mia did the right thing, or really honest, that anything about this crew's labor practices is good at all.
I mean, it's such a powerful, like, found family narrative, right? And
this is another way in which it is, I agree, a cozy, where it's kind of the idea is that you're supposed to side with the found family, even as they objectively kind of suck. I mean, each of them are great characters, and and they have some very like charming, close, dynamic moments, but they're kind of terrible.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, one of the things that is also absent from the book, along with men, is parents, like direct parents, like all of the major parent figures that we see. Although we do meet Mia's mom extremely briefly, but Mia's mom is almost completely absent from her, or moms, I should say, are almost completely absent from her life. Other than that,
because they shipped her off to boarding school.
Right.
And she's been in boarding school, I think, like, I get the impression that she was in boarding school through grade school as well.
But, like, Jules is an orphan, and it's not Grace's mom who's out there in the staircase bringing her back. It is one of those things where it's like, maybe this is actually not a Wizard of Rissless. Note here says, insert the word lesbians if possible. Maybe this is actually not a Wizard of Rissless lesbians book. It's a mom book. And all of the stuff about authority and being a wild chick and out on your own, and, sinking or swimming and all of the stuff, and getting in trouble for, not having your papers in order as far as, like, being the authority, being the adoptive, authority figure around these persons when you accidentally let them wander off into the space void.
Perhaps we're just old.
No, I think this is part of what the book or the story is about, is like, the absent parent figure, both in the person of the state and in person of the person, and the importance of being like your own, of striving out on your own, and then that rubs up against all the sort of rugged individualist colonialist plot lines in it, and ends up back at Wizards versus Lesbians, because these are lesbians who are, finding their own way in the world, and it is like a way of the world not unlike the way in the world that Vin Diesel's crew operates in the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah, I mean, and again, honestly, at this point, that's actually another check in the cozy column. um, which tend to be very like weirdly suspicious of the state. I guess not weirdly. They tend to be suspicious of the state because, the community is clearly and the family is clearly preferable so long as it's the found family. So long as everybody involved is queer, it's going to be fine. And
as long as you respect their pronouns.
As long as you respect their pronouns, then, it doesn't really matter that what's going on this planet that's kind of North Korea, except that there is an indigenous people that's being, slowly encroached upon, even as there's a great deal of virtue signaling over how they don't, how sacred they are. The politics of this comic are not really holding up on, except the thing is that, the real thing is that this, for all that it is dreamlike, the sort of vague sketches of a world do have like fairly good realistic resonance, and I can't tell if this is supposed to be gesturing at the idea that no, actually there is a lot of complicated bad stuff going on, and we're not supposed to take everything at face value, and maybe we're not supposed to take the final chapter where they fly off into the sunset entirely positively, given that their wing did almost fall off. Like, maybe the assumption is that there's a lot of disasters ahead, and probably they'll survive, but they're not necessarily going to come out unscarred.
Of course, it's life. That I would say the book would say that's a happy ending.
Right, but the idea is that, the question is whether we're supposed to go, everything is great, or we're supposed to go, well, this is a disaster, but, it is just, you have to be involved in some disasters in your early 20s. That's just life. And one of these, I think, is more supportable than the other.
I think it's the latter.
I think so, too. But the thing is that there's absolutely a reading of this comic. There is a cozy reading of this comic where you're supposed to, I think, assume that, no, this was the right thing to happen. Everything is going to be great from now on. And nothing really, and, the staircase is unproblematic. And...
Well, you said earlier we're old. I say we have anxiety. And that maybe the way that happy people live their lives is that, well, I didn't die that time. That means I probably won't die the next time this happens. Let's continue to go out there and risk our lives.
The author is dead and all, but having read her memoir, I'm not, convinced that she has never experienced some anxiety either.
This is true. I think that in this sort of firestorm of nitpicking that we've done over the course of this, for which I'm largely responsible, that I once again should not undersell how beautiful and well made this is. And so,
and again, it's not just pretty. I mean, first of all, it is, because part of the thing actually from the sort of professional era, the webcomics suddenly being done by professionals era, is that we get a lot of comics that are very clearly done by professional artists and not professional, or by, art school students and graduates who aren't actually particularly good writers. You get a lot of things that are absolutely beautiful, but kind of empty. Both narratively.
Tilly Walton is also a really good writer, I would say.
And also, you also, I felt like, got a lot of stuff from that era that's very polished and pretty, but not actually artistically particularly interesting.
Which is not true of this by any sense.
This is, no, like, the use of color in this, the way that color is used to signal whether you're in the past or the present, and then the way that slowly breaks down is really so well done.
Right, and also, like, all of it's flat. There's no shading. There's highlights
shading
occasionally. But,
right, there's occasionally highlights. There's occasionally, like, highlights and sunbeams and shadows, but never on people. It's only, like, to create a sense of how vast or cozy the space is.
Yeah, it's so it is not polished in the, in the sort of, we put on the yassification filter to make everything look quote unquote better way that the AI companies are currently trying to sell us.
Right.
It is beautiful because aesthetic decisions were made about the ways in which to use or to not use different techniques, and the effect is all the more impressive given the ways in some that it's like that it feels sketchy and quick and like energetic in its line work and that kind of thing. Very early notes. I do want to make some notes here. I want to shout out my favorite joke in the entire comic, which is that when the other girls' school arrives for the for the race, the actual school just goes and comes over in space to float next to the other school. It's like there's nothing is made of this. No character goes like, well, that's well, that happened. It's just there, and it's so incredibly funny. I really appreciate that.
I love the moment where Grace is packing to go to boarding school, and she's basically the princess of space North Korea, and so, which means all of her clothing, she owns lots of really nice stuff, and her sisters, who at least clearly have access to, media from outside space North Korea, keep going, maybe not that dress, maybe not that hat. And then finally she holds up her light up shoes, and her sisters are all like, yes, absolutely the light up shoes, because they just can't like bear, she's so excited about her light up shoes that they're like, nope, no, we can't.
We didn't get to talk about like Grace as a character at all.
I know, it's just too bad, because actually she's a great character.
I love the way that your understanding of what kind of weird she is evolves. When it's like, oh, are you meant to be autistic? No, you're meant to be a Mennonite. You're meant to, oh, never mind, you're the princess of space, North Korea? ?
Right.
But all
and
the
also
time.
But also she wants to be a writer. And so some of the weirdness is just that she wants to be a writer.
And so she gets to be the sort of like, again, sort of over serious, not actually glasses girl in this case, but, that sort of feeling manga character. But she also is a fully fleshed out, realized human character, which they all are. Again, like major props to the author for pulling that off. And so as our understanding of her shifts, as Mia's understanding of her shifts, as like more truth comes through, we get this like multidimensional understanding of her. I think part of my problem with the staircase part of it is that just Grace isn't there for a lot of it.
Yeah,
she's one of my favorite characters. And
yeah, I agree.
And I guess so we're going there to get Grace. You're meant to feel the lack of grace in the book.
And sure enough, we feel the lack of grace.
Yeah.
I do also kind of like that. I like that the story doesn't 100% resolve like what Mia and Grace's relationship is going to be in the future.
Of course. Yeah.
As it should. No, but like a lesser comic would have done that. And it doesn't. Even when you future skip, it's like, okay, Grace is on the crew, but she's partly on the crew because she doesn't know anyone else. And she's leaving partly because she wants to leave. Like, she's always wanted to leave the staircase. And she got dragged back because of family politics. But, when she tells Mia, okay, I'm not quite ready to run off with you yet, it's partly just because, like, she needs an hour to be like, am I actually leaving forever? Yes, I am. But it's not about Mia necessarily.
Some more notes on like manga influence or like manga feelings that I got from this. On the reread, having forgotten what the plot was, I had immediate thought, we're foreshadowing that Grace is dying. Because there's so many like manga and anime about like my high school girlfriend died of a mysterious wasting disease, and we're going to do an entire elegiac, sometimes quite an Iyashike story about the feelings around that. which did not turn out to be the case, but I felt like it was invoked in certain ways.
That is funny. I never got that vibe. Not the first time I read it, and not on the reread. But I remembered how it ended. So I think that's a totally supported claim. I never got it.
You're supposed to like think about why she's not present, in the future, as it goes on, and like my immediate thought was, oh, because she died. But this is also a story in which nobody dies, except people who died off screen to give people their characters.
I assumed that there was something special with her going on. Like, I didn't quite have Princess of Space North Korea, but I did have from a very important family. And this is why she can get away with this stuff. She just had like kid who is sufficiently untouchable that she can complain that, when she gets sent to detention for wearing her light up sneakers, she can claim that it's creative oppression.
Mm-hmm. The fact that the silent non-binary character can flash step, extremely manga.
Mm-hmm.
The silent character at all. The power haircut, as you mentioned, very very manga. We need more power haircuts. I feel like we don't see power haircuts as much these days as we used to get, even in lesbian.
Sorry, got a power hair. Got her power undercut.
Yeah, no, we need more of that, please. As the cultural significance of like quote unquote feminine hairdos has diminished, we've gotten fewer power haircuts in our stories.
Well, maybe this whole trad wife trend will bring back the lesbian power haircut.
That is we're going to get some great songs out of this.
I know, right?
Yeah. One of the sort of the less fortunate elements of the manga influence here is that even though we do a very good job of making making this a very multi-ethnic future in which it is genuinely, there is no racism, nobody ever mentions it, just we have a bunch of people with different human ethnic backgrounds around. Everybody has the same body type, which is a blind spot that a lot of webcomics had. And continue to have, or as to the extent that webcomics exist anymore.
A lot of comics had and continue to have, and a lot of other stories, honestly, have and continue to have. Even in fiction, where you can't, claim difficulty with the drawing.
Yeah, it stood out to me. I'll put it that way, as a story that is very much in that box checking mode of the 2010s with a lot of its decisions, once again, the non-binary pronoun lecture bit, but missed that one.
Well, that was one that often got missed.
It is one that often got missed and is getting missed less these days than it used to.
It's true. And actually, I'll note that this is, I actually don't think you can blame the manga influence for this, because I think that the strongest manga anime and visual influence on this is Miyazaki. I mean, you've got the Spirit Fox thing is incredibly Nausicaa. The Grace's tracking pendant is, looks just like, you get all these panels that look just like they, are like Laputa fan art. But one thing that Miyazaki does really well is his protagonists all have the same body type, but they live in a world full of different bodies.
That's true.
And in this case, part of, like none of the adults, you don't get any, big Miyazaki strong men or, like big Miyazaki pirate women or whatever. Or old people. There's also like no old people.
It is a very sort of youth-centric and beauty-centric narrative, for better or worse.
But yeah, everyone, including the like handful of adults, is young and beautiful. Except the person who doesn't use pronouns looks a little bit older.
It is part of the like we're kind of in heaven, feeling that sort of wraps itself around this, and the question of, well, are you though? And the story being like, well, yeah, actually. Vermont is heaven. Space Vermont is heaven. Yeah. Did you have any notes that we didn't get to?
I don't think so. Oh, actually, I did like, and this still is getting back into the, how much are we supposed to read into what's going on in the background. I like the brief moment between Grace and Elliot where Grace is like, "Oh, you're the one who killed the spirit fox, aren't you? Don't worry, I won't tell. Also, I liked your mentor's maps." Like, just, and she's really awkward about it. It's the, "Oh yeah, I know you committed an atrocity. Don't worry, I won't tell any of our mutual friends."
Well, it's because, we know that within the family, the found family, that it's not, that kind of stuff is not as important as the family. And,
Right.
who hasn't been party to a little genocide in their time? And that's actually a legitimate question. Who hasn't? So,
Well, the thing is that, there's having been party to genocide in the sense of, one is the citizen of a industrial nation that, is either directly making war on or supporting powers that do make war on, vulnerable populations. But then there's, no, you actually did kill that thing with a gun. Like, there's a difference, actually,
there is a
between
difference.
just being an American and, like, going off to insert atrocity of going on in the world here and shooting people.
Yeah. We'd like to flatten that distinction, and the thing about flattening that distinction is that it means that there is no more room for moral action in your life after being born into an imperial power, which is not a good recipe for anything changing. So,
right. Also, it creates this idea where being the person holding the gun is and shooting the gun is in fact morally equivalent to whatever your, college's investments are. And,
right.
And like being a student at said college. And I actually do think that is meaningfully different.
Well, you heard it here, folks. That's our political statement on the.
This is our political statement.
To round this one out.
That, well, no, but again, the thing is that it's such an awkward moment, and it's this bit of unresolved tension. Like, partly because the only time Elliot ever talks is when they're at home, and then when they leave home, they stop talking again. So I liked that they're not cured by going home. And they have access to something which they then lose again as soon as they have to flee. And so as a result, like, Grace is like, "Don't worry, I won't tell people that you were party to this atrocity." And Elliot can just sort of nod and shrug.
Yeah. That is something that is retconned, incidentally. It's like, it's implied early that that Elliot's nonverbal thing happened because of a disaster that this group of people was involved in, on a job, and that is, I think, changed later quietly. But I think that it works better as a form of penance almost that Elliot is doing, but weirdly a form of penance that mostly just inconveniences everybody else around them. There's room for interpreting Elliot as a veteran here, what with the PTSD and the martial skills and all. Supporting the troops is broadly in line with everything else presented here. But yes, it is. There's plenty of room to read this being more or less aware of its politics and of the issues that it's raising. But the thing that makes me approach it the way that I do is that this just is set against how utterly, like, etheringly comfortable and pretty everything is.
Yes.
Which makes it really a challenge to read it in a way that is cynical,
Yeah. Well, and it might just be a case of the author did a good enough job building and inhabiting the world that, that it gives rise to a plausible political counter-reading.
Sure. I mean, there always is one. If you make your humans realistic enough, there always is one. I mean,
right. But, again, that's a higher bar to clear than a lot of stories do.
Yeah. Again, this is really good. I feel like I want to shout from the rooftops because
Yeah,
we occasionally
we've been
get,
picking this apart, but this is really good and like is absolutely worth the time it will take you to read it.
and we do occasionally get comments from people who are like, oh, you were so negative about this one thing. And it's like, it's the text is rich enough that we have all of these things to discuss about it,
Right.
in both in itself and in the context of the world and in the context of the way that art has, and we haven't really even really touched on like the history of webcomics and where this takes place in that and so on and so forth. So that's the note that I want to end it on. This is good. You should read it.
Yeah. Nope, definitely.
All right.
Good note.
And
all right.
until next time.
Bye.
Bye bye. Lesbians, 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 lesbians.